right, welcome to the Parkland Report. I'm Stephanie Stewart, Vice President for Communications and External Affairs, and your host of the Parkland Report, where we talk about all things happening at Parkland College. And today I am joined by Dr. Tom Ramage. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm at home today.
Well, I'm at the office, but in my own office, and we're not in the studio, which is different for us.
It is. Well, it's becoming more familiar, though. We're doing this a whole lot more than we used to, this virtual stuff and work from home and alternative ways of doing things. It's starting to get common.
It is starting to get common. I was reflecting back on our conversation from last year. We were talking at that time about some transition planning, and boy, did we not know what was coming for the rest of the academic year.
Pushed aside quickly, didn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. So we can talk about everything that's changed, and that's actually on my agenda for the show today. But let's reflect a little bit on the transition planning and just check in on how that's going, because I know it was a multi-year process that you laid out for us last year and that our trustees were leading. So how is it going?
Right. So if I have my dates right, I think it was last September. I was in discussions with our board about what my future might look like, and I had opted into an early retirement incentive that Parkland's had for a number of years. So basically it was time to let the board know that I have an expiration date at Parkland, and to get that out there just up front, basically I'll be leaving the college in December of 2022. So right as we switch over to the year 2023, we'll have a new president. So part of that discussion with the board was what do you want to do and lead up to that date? There's obviously many options, including a search. They had been watching internally Dr. Lau, who has been serving as our chief academic officer for at least 5 or 6 years, I think, at that time. And we're very pleased with her work. So I think one of the suggestions that we talked about was making a very simple transition plan that would include Dr. Lau becoming an executive vice president and relinquishing some of her academic officer duties, and then transitioning slowly into the presidency. And basically on January 1st of 2023, she would just become the president of Parkland. The board liked that option. We discussed it a bit. I put my retirement papers in, and they expressed publicly their support for Dr. Lau, and she soon became executive vice president. And then the world changed. COVID came, all kinds of other intricacies happened. Maybe that's a good word for it. And it's sort of, we forgot about it, or at least I did, because so many other things were going on. But I think the good news is Dr. Lau is still transitioning. She's doing well. We have a new chief academic officer and associate vice president. Her name is Nancy Sutton, and she's been in the job for quite a while now, and doing a fine job. So I think the transition is going well, even though it's sort of overshadowed by maybe some other things.
Yeah, it was obviously a big announcement for the college, well received by and large by the community, and definitely understanding the benefit of a slower transition. So maybe it's good that the transition hasn't been abrupt or remarkable, that it's been...
Or they're glad to see me go, one of the two, right? So that's a certain possibility. But no, I credit our board of trustees. They obviously were watching and paid attention and know when we have a bird in the hand. And we certainly do with Dr. Lau. She'll do just great. I couldn't be more pleased at how things have unfolded.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's really beneficial, I think, in the last few months, all the events unfolding, to be able to have the opportunity to go through that as a team intact, and be able to take that experience hopefully forward, hopefully not for the next pandemic, but to get that experience under her belt before she takes the reins here in a couple of years. But
Totally agree.
Great. So I guess go ahead.
I was just going to say she's well suited for the job, given all that we've experienced in a very short period of time. I think there'll be little that will surprise her going forward.
Yes, this year has been good for that. So let's talk about the college's COVID response, because I think since we talked last, and if we'll, in years to come, we'll look back on these start of the year interviews with the president of the college, I think that we'll look back on this one and a ton has happened in this past year since we've had this conversation. So without, making you go into excruciating detail about everything that's happened, how has the college, in a general sense, adapted, responded, and transformed over the past 6 months as a result of the COVID-19 crisis?
Sure. Well, it's obviously everything has changed. There are some positive aspects to that change in that when we were forced in March, I think it was March 21st, to move to a totally remote or totally online option to finish out the spring semester for our students, it was quick. It took a lot of people by surprise, especially faculty who bore the brunt of that decision because they had to move so quickly to create content if their course wasn't online, or at least partially online, to get it that way very, very quickly. Not to mention those faculty members that teach classes that require equipment or a certain specialty lab. That's a tough thing to do when nobody can come to campus. Matter of fact, it's impossible. And then we had a number of students who were enrolled in health professions courses where they were engaged in clinicals at facilities like hospitals or nursing homes or skilled care residencies. They had to basically stop doing those clinicals. So it was a major change. The good part about it was that Parkland has some experience. We've been doing online courses since 1998, actually maybe even 97, and we've done it pretty well. Parkland, for those who don't know, was the leader in the state of Illinois for at least a decade, maybe longer, in terms of the number of courses that we had online, and certainly in the number of students that we served in online courses. It was upwards of 10 or 12% of our total student population in maybe the late 90s, early 2000s. And certainly we've kept up that program, those programs, but it's been around that same percentage, maybe 13% of our total sections, maybe at the highest count. So we have faculty who know what they're doing online. We have systems and tools that have been tested, and certainly the rest of the world is caught up with Parkland. There's far more pieces of software that make life easier when you're trying to move content online. But we have a group of experts on campus that can help those who are less familiar get familiar in a very, very quick manner. So that's the positive side of an unfortunate event. Summer was pretty much online as well, although we were able to bring students back to campus to finish those lab and clinical courses when the phases shifted and it was safe for us to do that. But now we're looking at fall semester. We're 3-4 days into fall semester now, and we're taking precautions very seriously. Our campus is masked 100% of the time, almost 100% of the time with some exceptions. But you don't come on campus, you don't go into a classroom unless you're distanced and masked, plus all the other precautions one might expect, from cleaning classrooms and keyboards and doorknobs and restroom facilities, all those things that you might expect. We have those special sprayers that kill bacteria, kill viruses in a very short period of time. A number of those are used every night on campus to make sure that we're as antiseptic as possible. So we're optimistic that we'll have a decent fall semester here in terms of managing through a pandemic. What have I missed?
I think you really have given a good summary. Yeah, I think, I'm walking the halls today and I'm on campus and obviously you're at home virtual. And so this is sort of our new normal in the sense that there's a lot of, sort of split scheduling and things like that to reduce the density of students here on campus. But there's been so far excellent compliance in terms of the campus, and that the community response and the community compliance, I think, has also been going as honestly as well as it could, given the circumstances. So we're hopeful to be able to have a successful semester, as you mentioned. And then do you have any thoughts on spring, or what people might expect, or when a decision might come on something like that?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on how this semester goes. So we're in a community that we share with a major university. There's 40 to 50,000 new additions to our community over the past couple of weeks. There's obviously a great plan in place in terms of testing and contact tracing and mitigation as much as possible that we'll benefit from as a community. But we'll have to see how it goes. Things could go very, very well, or they could not. I don't think anybody knows. We'll know in a short period of time, I think. But what happens in the next, let's say, month, I think will drive a lot of what happens in the spring semester. So fall, for reference, about 70% of all of our course offerings are what we call hybrid. So they're partly online and partly on campus. So if you've had a typical Monday, Wednesday, and Friday course, you might come to campus on Wednesday and do some on-campus, in-class stuff with your faculty and a small percentage of the student population. The rest of the time, it's online. About 3% of our total sections are 100% on campus, and those are only the sections, like I explained before, that have some sort of lab or clinical component that requires students to be physically present. And then the balance are online. So that mix for spring semester may shift a bit. I'm sure we'll have plenty of online courses. Students this semester seem to want those online courses in favor of over hybrid courses. So we've made a little adjustment for fall semester as we're in it. We have some late start classes that maybe will offer less hybrid, more online. It's all based on student demand. But spring remains to be seen, and we're optimistic. A vaccine could change things dramatically. There's a lot of variables in play at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the variables that is still unknown is really how this crisis will change student behavior over the next couple of years as it relates to enrollment and demand for what community colleges have to offer. So there was a lot of speculation early on and a lot of articles coming out saying that community colleges are going to see a huge boost. And we're certainly on a good path this semester at Parkland, but we're not flooded necessarily in terms of enrollment. But where do you see maybe 6 months or a year down the road? How do you envision community colleges playing a role in the overall recovery from this crisis?
Yeah, that's a great question. If I had the answer to that, something great would happen, I'm sure. But again, it remains to be seen. There are so many variables in play. So it wasn't too long ago, in Parkland's particular instance, where we were down compared to last year's fall semester by quite a bit, a scary amount. We have since made most of that up. We're still down a bit, but back up 3 or 4 weeks, and we in the community college system, Parkland also, were fairly optimistic that when students were faced with a decision of going to a university, wherever it was, and having to spend the majority of their time in a dorm room, taking classes mostly online, that would shift some behavior, shift some thinking, and the community colleges would be the beneficiary of those decisions. Certainly that happened, but I think it happened much later than we expected, and I think it's still happening actually now, that students are making some different decisions. Spring and next fall and next spring, I think, will be guided by those experiences that are had right now. So if it's a good experience and things relax a little bit in terms of what we can do socially when we're on a campus, how a community or restaurant or entertainment facility is able to handle non-class activities, I'm trying to say this diplomatically, I think that will make the decision or be a good part of the decision about how our enrollment looks. Typically, we've benefited from a downturn in employment. So when the unemployment rate goes up, typically our enrollment goes up, and when the converse happens. So with so many people affected by employment-wise by COVID, it would seem to be a logical conclusion that community college enrollment would tick up. However, maybe not. It depends on what people decide to do. Depends on what sort of assistance is available, whether that's state or federal. So again, I'm giving you a lot of a lot of words because I have no answer. There's a lot of variables that are still in play. And, we hope for the best. We don't want our university friends to suffer, but we would certainly like to see our enrollment tick up, because I think we have a valuable service that we offer our students at a very competitive price.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be very interesting to see how things play out, how people's behaviors are different now than maybe a crises of yesteryear, if you will. Like the housing market is strong. There's still discussion in terms of additional federal relief. So those are all things I know we're discussing, but it will be, interesting to see how community colleges play a role in the years to come.
What do you think, Stephanie?
I think that there will be a delayed reaction. I think that there is a shock and denial a little bit of, is this really happening? And for this time period, can I just press pause on what I've been doing, or do I need to do something different? And so I think that the answer to that question for people is yet to be seen, that the pause is what's happening. And I think it won't be until people decide that there actually is a need to do something different that we'll see a shift one way or the other in community college enrollment. It might be that the demand is different than we're used to.
Right. The other, I think there maybe are two more variables that are worth mentioning. I think it depends on where you are in your career in higher education. If you're a junior or senior, your need to go back to the university campus is significantly higher than if you're an incoming freshman, where you can come to a community college and get those 2 years of general education requirements knocked out. And the second component is, what do you want to be? What do you want to do with your life? There are many, many more options that are becoming apparent to students besides a traditional 4-year university degree that are very viable choices, whether they're in a trade or a health professions program or a professional program that leads to let's call it an office job like graphic design or something along those lines, computer science. That there's so many more positions available now for people with those sets of skills that I think the calculus might change. Well, perhaps it will. We'll find out.
Yeah, I think people will consider all of the options and alternatives, and having had their expectations disrupted may open up actually a whole new set of possibilities for them in the years to come. So we'll have to see how that goes. But those are all really interesting points to raise. So wanted to ask a question about the work, because in your role as the president of the college, I think over time you've talked a little bit about how it was different when you first started, and then it evolved over time and your attention shifted to different things. And so how has this time period shifted your attention in terms of your day-to-day work and the work of your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. Pre-COVID, I would answer differently than post-COVID, although the work has certainly changed without that variable in it. The thing that I talk about, well, I'll tell you the story. When I first became president back in 07, 08, my internal monologue was, I'm going to spend most of my time working on things inside the college, because that's where I was comfortable. I wanted to continue to advance the institution in ways that I could with a whole new group of people in executive leadership, let's say. Some were around before, but I brought in, a number of new people because, things change, people retire, and there was probably 2 new vice president positions almost immediately at that time. So team building internally was fairly important. So that's where my head was. It wasn't long, let's say 3 or 4 years, when that shifted almost 180 degrees. What I mean by that is the community involvement part of my job as president, the state side and the political side grew steadily, and they have continued to grow in favor of less time involved in the college. Now, good thing for the people who are in the college, maybe I'm not in their hair so much, but we have a team that has grown over those years that gives me extraordinarily high levels of confidence. I don't worry about what's going on inside the college, because the people who are running the show, so to speak, are very, very good. They're tested, they're experienced. I know what to expect. They know what to expect from me, and it generally works very well. Now, not to say that we don't have, bumps and issues to get through, but by and large, I am very relaxed about the way things are going inside. That said, the external component I complain about a bit, which is regulation. Others, whether it's state or federal level folks that have a desire to have a voice in what goes on in higher education or in the community college specifically. I think that's an interesting trend, and I don't think it's particularly positive. If you spend your life or your career moving in a particular discipline forward, and you become somewhat good at that, I think folks who aren't in that discipline ought to pay more attention to perhaps when you say this is good or this is not so good. I see that happening less and less. I'm trying to be diplomatic about it, but there's lots more people who are interested in how we do things, what we do, and controlling our resources than ever before. Some of that's been good, certainly. Some of it's not. And I think we're in a very, very precarious state in higher education now in terms of what we do going forward and how we operate as institutions across the country.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how the rebuilding efforts and that interest intersect, hopefully for the benefit of students. But yeah, there's a lot happening on that front, and hopefully there's a way that can culminate, not only to support enrollment and engagement in community colleges, but to assist individuals who are needing skills to be able to parlay that into what's next for them and what's next for their families.
That's an upside there. You work with a program directly that has made a significant amount of funding available to Parkland and other community colleges that really hasn't been available before. And it's helping a group of students that perhaps in a different way than we have been able to before because of the size of the contribution. That's a positive outcome of, let's call it, state involvement in what goes on in higher education. But on the other hand, there's things that detract from that as well. But good and bad.
Yes.
Perhaps it's always been that way, and maybe I'm just getting older and crankier and noticing it more. Who knows? I'm about to retire.
Well, speaking about being crankier, no. So I wanted to ask you this question because there's a lot to take in right now. There's a lot to help to translate into Parkland's context that's happening externally, and a lot of that are not so good circumstances that we can't control. But there are still good things happening. So at the end of the day, when you're taking account of COVID cases, we have to keep watching those, and there's a lot of negative, honestly, and things that are anxiety inducing. But what are some of the positive things that have come across your desk recently that are reaffirming for you
Sure.
your role?
Well, a lot of it is on the programmatic side. So, regardless of the COVID situation, our assessment of the community needs continue. And that means we evaluate programs for enrollment, need, new businesses, new opportunities, new fields that are affecting employment opportunities, basically, in our community, and we continue to adjust. So a program that's not necessarily new, but one that we're putting a lot of marbles in or a lot of eggs in its basket is precision ag. And we've done that very quickly and fairly successfully. Just the other day, we signed an articulation agreement with another community college a good ways away that recognized the fact that our precision ag program was quality. So some of their students have the opportunity to come to Parkland in that program and get in-district tuition, which is a very significant discount. There are other programs. I think we have a new certificate in the automotive area for Mercedes-Benz. That will likely attract more students. We're doing some internal readjustment of our support services. So I think there'll be more different, interesting opportunities for students, especially when we come back face-to-face, or at least a little bit more face-to-face in the coming years. I think another big thing that's been improved, not necessarily because of positive things, but because of the way the world is our technology infrastructure. We've invested a fairly significant amount of money in two things, technology-wise. One is network security. Our firewalls, our authentication systems, how we protect our data, especially personally identifiable information like Social Security numbers or grades, that has been significantly improved. The other side of that is the instructional component. Obviously, we're doing a whole lot more online. We were pretty good at before, but there are a lot more tools that we have in our tool belt today than we did, let's say, 6 months ago. And a lot of that is driven by an infusion of money from both the federal and the state side that allowed us to do that. But it was a good time to make that investment. So lots going on. Some of it's behind the scenes, some of it's visible. Our finances are generally in okay shape. Maybe you have a question about that. I should maybe leave finances off for a bit, but there's been some press recently about how we were going to deal with a financial situation that was driven mostly by that downturn in enrollment that we talked about. I think we've found a fairly viable solution going forward, assuming nothing else bad happens, negative happens relative to state finances or their contribution to the college, or we don't bleed any more enrollment significantly. We'll be okay. We'll be fine. We'll work through a period of, let's call it uncertainty going forward. But I think Parkland, well, I know Parkland is strong and will be regardless of what happens. We'll adjust. We always have, we always will.
That's great. Well, I had one final question that you started to answer, but looking into the year ahead, there's going to be a lot, I'm sure, that we cannot anticipate. But what can the community expect from Parkland in this coming year?
Well, stability, I think, is probably the best way to answer that question. And I mean that from a tuition standpoint. I know our trustees spend an awful lot of time looking at budgets and budget projections in order to make sure that our tuition adjustments, which are generally up, are as little as possible when they do go up. We've had a couple of years in the last 5 where we haven't raised tuition, which is a great position to be in, but it's not terribly sustainable in over a long period of time. The inputs into our budget aren't growing as fast as the expenditure side, and those are naturally growing costs. Healthcare costs continue to escalate. The cost of heat and electricity and all those things, those don't go down generally. So in order to keep up with that escalation, our revenue has to grow somehow. And that's either done by cutting expenses that are able to be cut or raising revenue. And the only thing we really have control of is tuition. So that's a long answer to a short question about the stability on the expense side. The other component of that is we're going to be here for students. Whatever your needs are, whether it's a particular program, whether it's helping you get to another community college that has the program that you want. If we don't particularly have it, we can do that. And then making sure that our core functions, our foundational functions are there, that they work well, and that they serve students to the best of our ability. Maybe that's a good place to stop there.
I think it's a great place to stop. But
All right.
I appreciate you spending the time with me today, and it'll be interesting to see when we have this conversation next year what transpires, and hopefully not too many unexpected things, and hopefully some good news to share.
I certainly hope so. We'll count on it.
Yes, we will. All right, that's it for today's episode of the Parkland Report. We'll have a new season of the Parkland Report episodes coming your way. They will be mostly in this virtual Zoom recording format, and you'll be able to watch them both on on PCTV and on our YouTube channel. And I hope you'll keep watching. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.